In the last section, we started putting together our Express application. We're going to use that thing to test out both cluster mode and worker threads to enhance the performance of our application. So let's first get started by doing a quick overview around cluster and clustering inside of our app, and then we're going to actually implement it inside of our Express application. So let's get to it. All right. So the first thing to keep in mind here, and this is all super relevant because we just spoke about all that event loop stuff, is that whenever some request comes into our server, it gets processed inside of one single thread that contains our event loop. So some request comes in, our server processes it, and then it generates a response. Now in general, this totally works out just fine for us. And certainly in the vast majority of Node applications, if you follow this pattern right here, you're going to have a great time and things are going to work out just the way you expect. However, we start to run into some really big issues when these incoming requests right here take some amount of time to process. So if we have some request coming in that requires a lot of processing power, like a lot of JavaScript code that you and I write that takes a long time to run through, then our Node server is not going to be able to process incoming requests as effectively as it otherwise would. Now I'm using a lot of whatever words here. Might seem a little bit boring, so I'll tell you what, let me show you a quick example of exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to go back over to my Express server right here, and right above my request handler, I'm going to create a new function, and I'm going to call this thing do work, like so. Whenever we call do work, we're going to pass in an argument called duration. Now the sole purpose of this little function right here is to try to use as much CPU processing power as it possibly can for some set duration. And this duration will be some number of milliseconds. Now there's a very, maybe I shouldn't say clever way of doing this, but there's a very easy way that we can kind of simulate doing a lot of work for some very specific set duration. So I'm going to say const start is date.now, and then I'm going to write out a while loop. I'll say while date.now minus start is less than duration, and then I'll open up the while loop like so. So the instant we call do work, we take the current time. We then enter the while loop right here, and then check the condition. So if date.now, if like the new present time minus the starting time is less than duration, then we're going to continue running this while loop right here. So in total, this function is going to try to execute this while loop as fast as it possibly can for some set duration in milliseconds. And it's going to do absolutely nothing else. So let's now add a call to do work inside of our request handler and just see what type of impact it has on our application. So right above our res.send, I'm going to add in do work, and I'm going to say try to do work for 5 seconds straight. So 5,000 milliseconds, which is 5 seconds. Now here's the critical thing to keep in mind. This code right here is going to be executed inside of our event loop. This doesn't get thrown out to an event pool. It doesn't get handled by the operating system or anything like that. This is some code that is going to be processed in our event loop. And for these 5 seconds while we are running this while loop, our event loop can do absolutely nothing else. That means it cannot handle other requests. It can't do other database queries or write files, whatever else, or anything else while this while loop right here is running. So let's see that in action right now. If I go back over to my browser, I'll refresh the application and notice how, I just forgot, we got to restart the server very quickly back at the terminal. I'm going to restart my server very quickly. I know I just said that we're not doing NodeMon, but I already forgot about that. So I'll restart the server, and then if I go back to my application with my request log up here, I should be able to refresh the page, and then you'll notice that we're just going to sit around for 5 seconds and wait for this thing to load. And then eventually there, all right, 5 seconds just about. Now, okay, well for this one request, who cares if it takes a little bit longer? But remember, we are blocking the entire event loop with that one little do work function call. And that means that our entire server can do absolutely nothing else while that is being processed. So let me show you the effect of that. I'm going to open up a second tab inside my browser, and I'm going to enter in localhost 3000, but I'm not going to go there just yet. So let me tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hit enter right here, That's going to start up my server running that do work function for 5 seconds. Then inside of this second browser window that I have right here, I'm going to very quickly come back over and I'll hit refresh right here. And you're going to see that it's going to take even longer than the 5 seconds we see right here, because our server is going to be busy processing this request, and it will not even start considering our second one over here until the first one is complete. So let's try this out very quickly. I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to flip back over as fast as I can and hit refresh. And now we're going to wait. Okay, and you know what? It took 5 seconds. That's really frustrating, but basically it's just because the way that this page over here loaded up. Watch this. I'm going to do it one more time. In the second tab, I'll hit reload. I'll come back over and hit reload. And now you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. I know that first time was a little letdown. Okay, so we're waiting. And this time it took about 8.5 seconds. That missing 1.5, like 10 seconds minus 8.5 right here, so that 1.5 seconds just about, was essentially the time that it took me to flip between these two browser tabs and hit the refresh button over here. So as you can see, this is kind of a long demonstration, but you can very plainly see that as soon as you and I start writing some JavaScript code that takes some amount of time to execute, our entire server is blocking any other requests that are coming in. And it can do absolutely nothing else until that original request gets resolved and handled. So clearly the effect of some very long running or computationally intensive code inside of a Node project can be quite catastrophic. Definitely not ideal at all. All right, so with that in mind, now that we understand why having Node run into a single thread right here can sometimes be not a very good approach, let's come back in the next section and we're going to start to see how clustering can start to maybe not solve this problem, but at least mitigate it. So quick break, and I'll see you in just a minute.